Go. How's everybody doing today? Good.
Coach Graham talked about how he liked the tempo in the first half at UCLA. How much did you guys try to factor, the up tempo into the game plan, and what are the benefits when you do?
Well, I think varying tempo and managing the tempo throughout the game is critical. A lot of it has to do with the effect it's having on the opponent, and then also I think you got to keep a good track of where your defense is at, what their play count looks like, and where they're at from a fatigue standpoint. And if we're able to get some tempo started and it affects the opponent like it did early in that game, I think it's an advantage for us. We certainly used it to our advantage early in that game. We felt like it would be something that we could do, and it worked well.
Todd said that he would like to see you guys take more shots down the field. How difficult is it when you're trying to maybe sustain long drives, control the clock a little bit, and also work in those shots?
Well, there's no question that I think it's something that we need to do more, and it's something I think that can create explosive plays for us. There's a fine balance in there between being efficient when you do take those shots, because you can get yourself into some bad down and distances. But I think we've done a great job when we have taken shots of taking advantage of those. But it's certainly an area where I think we can do better. It's something that we've practiced really hard this week in particular, and something that I think hopefully in the future we can do a little bit more of.
After watching the red zone sequences in the second half, what do you think about what happened there?
Well, I think it comes down to second down in particular. I think there's a few calls you'd like to have back, but overall, when you look at it, I think a lot of it just is execution, whether it be technique, whether it be decision making, and it's a group effort. I think there's every unit can take a little bit of ownership in maybe some of those areas, but certainly that's been a big strength of ours. We got ourselves into some third downs down there where it wasn't quite. It was a passing down to some degree, and I think, going back and look at it, second down was where we had the issues, where we didn't necessarily have the efficient plays and the execution that we needed. So it's a learning experience. There's no doubt about that. I told our guys this morning, today for us is a red zone third down day from an installation standpoint. I think we know the value of third down. The USC game was a huge indicator of that, and there's no question in the UCLA game we learned how valuable scoring touchdowns in the red zone is. So big emphasis today in that area, and I thought we executed well in practice, and certainly we know the importance of getting in the end zone down there after last week.
Was the Patriot game really maybe a very unique challenge because they were playing the worst run defense in the Pac-12 in the game last week? It would be obvious. But then you look back, maybe 61 rushing attempts wasn't enough.
Right. Well, I think when you look at the tape, and I think that's the most important thing, is when you go back and you really take a good look at it, you got to look at the facts. You got to look at what are the issues, where were the execution issues, and I think we did that. We know where we made mistakes. We know where there needs to be ownership, and from every player, every coach, everybody in the building. So it is what it is. You don't get it back, and that's the thing about football. You don't get to play so many times a year. You get those opportunities. You got to go execute at a high level. And we certainly left some points out there, kicking 3 field goals, having the ball inside the 10 3 different times. So I'll never forget it, I can promise you that. And I think it's a big reminder to our players of the importance of punching it in once we cross that 20-yard line, and heck, even the 10-yard line last Saturday.
Weather looks like it might be a factor on Saturday. Is there any adjustments you make to the game plan because of that, or maybe some of the stuff you do in practice?
Well, interesting that you say that. I think one of the things we tried to establish back in the off-season program was that difficult circumstances and adverse conditions, we want to believe that that's to our advantage. We want to have a mindset and mental toughness that difficult scenario is to our advantage. The other team has to play in it too. We certainly want to handle it better than they will, but that being said, no matter where we play, what the conditions are, our focus has got to be on the preparation, the execution. Back when Tiger Woods was in his prime, he used to talk about he hopes it's raining. He hopes that the wind is a factor because he felt like he was more mentally tough than the rest of the guys on the tour. And that's something that I remember as a young coach and a player when he said that. We try to take that approach with our players in terms of being in those situations.
Coach, a lot of great receivers. Where do you think Keel is at in his developmental process?
I think he's a young player who has talent. I think he's a guy who has made some tremendous plays. He's a great competitor on game day. I think he's has a tremendous ceiling, and he's a player that will be a product of his work, his attention to detail, his self-discipline. And I think consistency is the key to the drill. What is your approach day in and day out? And I think Nikhil has an opportunity to be an outstanding player. He's got a unique skill set. He's big, he's physical, he's got great ball skills, he's difficult to tackle. But like most young players, attention to detail, self-discipline, understanding the big picture, learning how to keep your composure and poise at critical times. All these things are things that he's going through and learning. But certainly he's been one of our better competitors on game day and has been very productive at times. And I think in the future you're going to see him continue to improve. And that will be a direct reflection of how hard he works and what type of self-discipline and his approach day in, day out, the entire year. And that goes for every player that we have. And that will be the same even if the guy plays 7 years in the National Football League. Going into year 8, it's still a developmental game. There's still knowledge to acquire. There's still techniques to refine. There's still growth as a person. There's still maturity in your character. There's a lot of things that go with being a really good football player, and he certainly has the physical skill set to go a long way in this game.
Is there anything that he does that he catches today that just surprises you, or just for where he is in his career already?
Yeah, I mean, the guys, you say the term 50-50 ball. Heck, when it's up with him, I'd say the percentages are a little bit higher. But one of the most impressive plays I've seen is that punt return 2 weeks ago. That big of a man to do what he was doing. So, and hey, we just throw him out there a couple weeks ago and give him a shot returning punts, and the guy just does it. So he's an outstanding athlete, and we're looking forward to working with him more in the future.
Every quarterback wants to play. How does Blake handle just being the backup this season?
He's done a good job. I think the difficult scenario for him is the number of reps that you get, and then Tuesday and Wednesday we try to give our twos a pretty significant workload. As you get closer to the game, your repetitions go down, whether it be Friday walkthroughs or hotel walkthroughs, whatever the case may be. So just finding a way to stay engaged mentally and making sure, even though you're not getting the reps as you get closer to the game, you got to stay engaged and make sure you're on top of your game. He certainly showed some maturity in his approach, and I like his approach.
One of the things that stood out the most about Mario this year.
I was talking to a scout this week, and the scout's comment was the guy looks like he really loves to play the game. And I think Mario, the big challenge when I first got here was, just researching some of the players that we had on the roster. Mario was a 1,200-yard rusher or something like that 2 seasons ago, and just getting him back to that production level. I think DeMario has shown great maturity and growth just as a person, as a teammate, understanding his role, understanding that he has to choose his words wisely. For a while there, I just said, hey, keep your mouth shut and let's try to establish some credibility with your teammates just in terms of your approach and your work ethic, your dependability, so that when you do speak, it'll mean something. And I think his actions have spoke really loudly. The old saying, hey, your actions speak a lot louder than your words, I think applies to him. The way he plays, the way he prepares, he's one of our better practice players. He's engaged mentally. He understands the game plan each and every week. And he's been a great leader in some regards, just about how to compete, how to be at your best when your best is required.
Are there any similarities or differences between making a national championship push like Alabama and making a bowl game push here?
Well, I think the ultimate challenge is just keeping the players at a certain level in terms of their sense of urgency, the mental energy that's required to go execute and be prepared to play. And no matter where you're at in football, there's a certain level of buttons to push. There's a certain level there's a challenge to keep these guys engaged, in particular here at the end of the year. Sometimes there's a lot more on the line, but it's the same way for the other team. I think more than anything, what we've tried to talk with our players about this week is this game's about what we've invested as a group. It's about the relationships that we've built. It's about the work that we've done together. And Sam and I were talking this week. A tremendous amount of time and energy invested in this off season, and we want to see that pay off. In our preparation this week and how we play going forward, and we finish the season. That's the most important thing to me, is that these players see the value of their work and that it pays off for them in the end.
Last one, Jeff.
I had one more about Mario, when you were talking about, making him, or having him show what he can do. Do you think that he was talking like that 1,200-yard rusher because that's how he saw himself, even though he didn't actually achieve that last year due to injury or what?
Yeah.
And did he have to kind of come out and reestablish that?
Well, I just think, for whatever those reasons are, I didn't necessarily look at like, okay, hey, what's going on here or any of that. I just said, hey, look, you've had better seasons in the past. Let's get you back to that level of play, And a lot of that has to do with the people around you. It has to do with the urgency. It has to do with this game's a team game, and I think it requires great commitment from a lot of people, and I think that he's an individual, and hopefully we got a lot of individuals doing it the right way, and the collective effort produces results. And his role as a senior, we've got very few seniors on offense, him and Kalen and probably 3 or 4 others. That's it, so his role I knew was going to be big because he was one of the few seniors that we had on our offensive side. So immediately went to work on establishing that trust and communication with him along with those other guys.
Thanks, Billy.
All right, guys, thank you.